What do you think accounts for our fascination with cats? Is it because they're cute and fluffy and they cuddle on our laps? Or is it because they're aloof and mysterious? Personally, I like them because they're cute and fluffy. I have one of my own. But I have had some experiences with a couple of cats that are very much out of the norm. One of which actually was covered by the Huffington Post. True. Are two separate experiences separated by 30 years. My first experience with a cat that was out of the norm, I would not specifically classify it as paranormal. Some may. This cat, my little tabby cat Ringo, had a personality that was just huge. I mean, the cat knew how to say hell and no. And when she'd get really mad, she'd say, hell no. My parents heard this, my friends heard this, there was no mistaking it. The cat knew 2 words. Well, Ringo, she was a female, even though named after Ringo Starr, obviously. I'm a huge Beatles fan. And she was about 8 years old at the time of this incident. Now, she would sleep with me on my bed, and I was living at home still with my parents. I was in college at the time. Actually, it was my freshman year at Northwestern. It was winter time. And I had caught a severe cold that developed into tracheal bronchitis. Tracheal bronchitis is 1 step below walking pneumonia. And I was so sick, my doctor said, if I got any worse at all, he wanted me in the hospital on oxygen. And I was trying to complete my fall quarter of classes at Northwestern, which would have been my first quarter as a college student. And I'm like, there's no way I can leave college. I don't want to take a bunch of incompletes and then, have to deal with that later. So I was toughing it out. Northwestern, if you are unfamiliar with its location, it's right on Lake Michigan. Right on it. The lake, the university is here, the lake is there. You can walk to the lake easily from your dorm. So we get lake effect snow, which means along the lake you get extra snow. Hey, sometimes it's great. Most of the time it is not. And this happened to be a particularly bad winter. And so I was really sick. I was going home every weekend and basically to get taken care of and to have a break. And I was home this particular weekend, and I was so sick that my dad, he had me propped up on pillows when I went to bed at night because I was coughing up so much mucus. I couldn't lie down on my back. I would have choked on it. Definitely. I was that sick. So, it's the middle of the night. Ringo comes. Now, Ringo was the type, she wouldn't sleep on my bed all the time, but when I was sick, she was always on my bed. And if I woke up in the middle of the night, I would see her 2 little yellow eyes gleaming in the dark, watching me. She wasn't even asleep. She probably stayed up all night watching over me when I would be sick. This night was no different from any other night when I was really sick. Ringo jumped up on my bed, curled up at my feet, facing me, and I knew I had my little guardian there, my little protector. And I drifted off to sleep. Now, my doctor had me on some really strong medications for cough. Codeine. Codeine can really knock you out. I was on codeine. I was on some other stuff. I was on antibiotics. It was a mess. It was a mess. Well, I took all my doses at bedtime and then 2 times previous during the day as well because I was that sick. I was taking them 3 times a day. So at bedtime, I loaded up on the meds, went to bed. Dad made sure I had plenty of pillows behind me so I could sleep, basically reclined. And I went to bed. Went to sleep. Well, at some point in the middle of the night, now the rest of this experience comes from my parents, who delighted in telling this to our friends and family over and over and over again. With good reason. Middle of the night, my parents are sound asleep in their bed. Ringo comes running into their bedroom, howling. And this cat had a really loud, annoying howl. It was like a kind of like the cat I have now, who I actually think is the reincarnation of Ringo. And that will be a topic for another video, because I've got a friend of mine who has her own stories about reincarnated cats. So that'll be interesting. That'll be upcoming. So Ringo goes in there, and it scares the hell out of both my parents, because she's never done that. She had never had a proclivity for howling in the middle of the night. She would get the zoomies during the day and howl during the day. You know, she was polite that way, considerate. And so they're looking at each other and they're telling Ringo, shut up, Ringo, shut up, be quiet, be quiet. And Ringo, meow. And then she turned around and ran halfway to my bedroom and turned and looked over at her shoulder. And my mom right away grabs my dad's arm and says, Bob, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Go check on her. Go check on her. So he gets all freaked out. So he jumps up. He comes running into my bedroom. Ringo's leading the way, by the way. So by the time my dad gets into the doorway of my bedroom, she's up on my bed again. And he said he found me, slid off my pillows to the side. So I was kind of like in between the pillows and the wall. And because the pillows made this little mound and my bed was up against a wall, I couldn't move to readjust my body position. And so I was laying almost completely flat. And my dad said, as he was pulling me back onto my pillows, my lips had turned blue. And he wasn't even sure if I was still breathing. And so he started shaking me, and that motion of being shook, it didn't completely wake me up. I was that drugged up. It did not completely wake me up, but I remember being able to cough. And I mean, I don't want to be graphic and gross anyone out. Let's just say a lot of stuff came out. It was pretty bad. And you know, and since I was so drugged up, I couldn't go to the bathroom and take care of my face. So my dad went and got a wet washcloth and cleaned off my face and the front of my pajamas. And then he got pillows and blankets and he slept on the floor next to my bed. My dad, he was so awesome. I miss him so badly. Anyway, I didn't have classes on Mondays. I was really clever about arranging my class schedule. So I had no classes on Mondays, so I could enjoy 3-day weekends when I wanted them. Because my hometown, Waukegan, is only a 45-minute drive from Evanston, where Northwestern University is located. So, you know, my mom or my dad would come down to Evanston, pick me up, take me home for the weekend. So it was great. And I'd stay home 3 days, go back up Monday evening. So I was home through Monday. I saw my doctor Monday morning, and he was like, you're really fortunate. You're still here. And he says, he says, if you weren't slightly better today, I would have definitely admitted you to the hospital. He says, but you're a little bit better, so let's see how you do next 2 days. And I just proceeded to get better and better. But that is the night my cat Ringo literally saved my life. And after that, that cat was so spoiled. Anything Ringo wanted, Ringo got. Special treats, she got all fat, and she lived a very happy life. I mean, she always was happy anyhow, but from that point on, I mean, Ringo could do no wrong. Ringo would climb a curtain, and my mom would be like, get down from there, you know, not, you know, freaking out over it, and Ringo would, you know, get down. So that's the story of Ringo and how she literally saved my life. My other experience with a cat is similar. The situation is quite a bit more paranormal. That occurred when my husband and I moved from Austin to Corpus Christi, Texas, and a couple of years later we had our daughter. Our daughter at the time was about 4 months old, so she was really teeny tiny, you know, little baby, asleep in her crib. Her bedroom was right next to our bedroom. And my cat at the time that I had, his name was Dickens. He was a Seal Point Tabby. Seal Point Tabbies, they're half Siamese and half tabby cat. So he had the Siamese points and the blue eyes and then the gray body, but he had tabby markings on top of that. Beautiful, beautiful cat. he would, beginning the night we brought our daughter home from the hospital, Dickens would lie across the threshold of her bedroom and sleep every single night. And I thought that was kind of weird. And prior to my daughter being born, I had been an assistant manager for 2 years of a local New Age shop. And we dealt with the metaphysical and the paranormal practically every single day there. And I was calling my friends from work, and I was like, "Hey, the cat's doing this. What do you think?" And they were all just like, "Oh, there's something evil in your house, and your cat's protecting your baby, obviously." And I'm just like, because I had some other weird stuff happen during my pregnancy that definitely told me something was out to get rid of my baby. I have zero doubt. My friends have zero doubt. That's what happened. And that's a topic for another video that will be upcoming. Anyway, it's on my list. I've got a list almost as long as my arm. So I thought, don't tell me that these evil things are trying to get at my baby again, because I thought once she was born, all that would stop. Well, I was stupid. It didn't stop till my kid was 7 years old. My daughter was under repeated psychic attack from the minute of 6 months along in my pregnancy until she was 7 years old. And this was just one case. So my cat Dickens was always laying across the threshold of her room, right? So one night I couldn't sleep, and I'm awake, and I'm in the dining room, and I'm working on creating a new tarot spread for my clients. I had clients from the shop who are now coming to my home for readings, and I wanted to try out this new spread on myself to see if it would be good to use with my clients. So I'm out there with my tarot cards, and I'm doing a reading for myself to see how this spread will work and everything. And I can see my daughter's bedroom door from where I'm seated, and I can see Dickens, and he's laying across the threshold just like he does every night, All of a sudden, he just jumps up and darts into her room. I'm like, what in the hell? So I jump up and go running over there. My daughter was face down in her crib, and as I rolled her over, her lips were blue. And I thought immediately, SIDS, the sudden infant death syndrome that so unfortunately affects many babies. And I was just like, oh my God. And I hollered for my husband, and he came in. But no, she started breathing. So I think we caught her just in time before she would have smothered herself. Because, babies, they have a really huge head, and it's heavy. And when they're that little, they have a hard time flipping over. And plus, you've seen babies sleep. They can sleep through anything. So she was resumed breathing. She seemed to be fine. And the next morning, I took her into the pediatrician. And he said, well, we'll just keep an eye on her. And you've got a great cat there. Because I told him everything that happened. And he said, when she gets a little older, we're going to need to test her for asthma. My mother-in-law has severe allergic asthma. Her brother had really, really bad asthma where he was on an inhaler every day. So I thought, oh, great. Because that stuff's hereditary, And eventually my daughter did test positive for asthma, and she would have, her asthmatic attacks and would have to be on a nebulizer for a number of days to get through it. And then she'd be fine for a little while, have another attack, need the nebulizer. But I believe that night was the start of it. I don't know. She was also face down in her crib. She could have been in the process of smothering. We'll never know for sure either way. So that's the first incident where my cat reacted to something going on in my baby's room. Another incident occurred when my baby was about 9 months old. So by then my daughter was able to roll over and all this, and we weren't worried about, SIDS anymore or anything like that. And again, it was the same situation. It was a night where I couldn't sleep. But instead of being at the dining room table, I was on the couch reading a book, just trying to get drowsy so I could go to bed. And so I didn't have direct view of my daughter's room because the couch was at an angle and there was a wall between the couch and the hallway where the bedrooms were located. But I heard my cat scamper. And I was like, what's that crazy cat doing? And so I get up and kind of take a peek, and he's not across the threshold anymore. And I listen for him thinking, is he going off to bother my husband? Because Dickens was very nocturnal. He usually stayed up most of the night and slept most of the day. But no, what I heard was muffled voices. And it was the kind of voices where they sound like they're at a distance from you, like there's a TV on low in the next room. So you can hear that there's people speaking, but you can't make out any words. That's exactly what this sounded like. And I was just like, what in the hell? We did have a small TV in our master bedroom, which, like I said, was next to our daughter's room. So I thought maybe my husband couldn't sleep and he had turned on the TV. So I just peek in there because, the light from a TV in the dark, you'd see it immediately. And we always kept our door wide open. There was no light from the TV in our room. So I knew it wasn't the TV. And at that point, the voices stopped. But my cat was still, not within view. So I step into my bedroom. Dickens is standing on his hind paws, and he's got his front paws on my daughter's mattress, and he's just peering into her crib. And I'm like, I whisper, Dickens, Dickens, and he looks back at me, and I said, what's the matter? What's the matter? He looks back at me, he goes, meow. And he was a male cat. He was a big cat. He was like 18-pound cat. He had a deep guttural meow. He didn't meow little tiny cute like that ever. And I thought, oh no, don't tell me my daughter stopped breathing again. So I rushed in there and I looked down at her and she's peacefully sleeping on her back, sucking her thumb, nothing wrong with her. She was breathing evenly. And the cat is still with his paws up on the mattress, peering at her. And I'll look at him and say, Dickens, come on, Dickens, come on. Try to get him to leave the room. He wouldn't leave. Instead, he got down and he walked around to the foot of my daughter's crib, did the same thing. Stood up on his hind paws, put his front paws through the slots of the crib onto her mattress to watch her. And then I thought to myself, I did just hear voices. What if they were coming from in here and the cat's freaking out? So next day, I call one of my former coworkers and I'm like, hey, look, this happened last night. And she's like, I have a really bad feeling. I think it's spirits trying to get at your daughter. Now, to preface this, we lived in Corpus Christi, Texas, which is very much like living in Mexico. A lot of people there are very superstitious and they believe in signs and omens and ghosts and all sorts of things. And I did have a number of paranormal experiences while we lived there. And I can tell you that city, it's got a lot of dark energy there. Let's put it that way. A lot. And I thought, okay, I need to cleanse the house again. Prior to my daughter being born, as a spiritual worker, you literally do have to do spiritual house cleansings. On average, about once a month. That's what I was doing them as, once a month, to keep the energy clear. People come to you for readings, they're upset about stuff, and they drop their negative thoughts there, they drop their negative feelings there, they coalesce, and then suddenly it's like, the energy in your house is way off. You're in a bad mood all the time. You and your husband could be arguing. Kids could be acting up, whatever. A lot of times there's spiritual reasons for that. So it's important to keep your home spiritually cleansed. And so that's what I did on a regular basis once a month, first Friday of every month. When all this stuff started happening, I went up from doing it the first Friday of every month to doing it once a week. Some weeks I did it twice. If there was like an incident, like the one I just recounted. And if I'd cleansed my home Friday, a couple days earlier, I would cleanse it again immediately. And there were other odd things. There was the time that a wasp got in the house. Now, it's South Texas. There's a lot of wasps in South Texas. It is not uncommon for a wasp to get in your home. And a wasp had gotten in, and Dickens alerted me. It was the middle of the day, and the wasp was in my daughter's room. And it was walking along the top of her crib railing. And I was just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to get the wasp? And so I just I didn't know what to do, And I thought, I can't grab a can of Raid and spray Raid in here on my daughter's crib to, kill this wasp. And then Dickens, all of a sudden, lets out a little growl. And he's down on the floor at my feet, but he's looking up at the crib because he knows that's where the problem is. He has seen the wasp, alerted me that there was a wasp in her room. He lets out this little growl. I'd never heard him growl at anyone or anything. And I know, just like any other animal, cats can growl, Just never heard him do it. And I was just like, what in the hell? Why is he growling? Why are you growling at the wasp? And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna get a newspaper and I'm gonna shoo it away to another part of the bedroom and then smack the crap out of it and kill it. I go get a rolled up newspaper and a can of Raid. I go back in there. The wasp is still there. And so I kind of shoo it away and I get it over on the opposite wall where her changing table is, and I'm able to take care of the wasp over there. That wasp was smashed, it was beheaded, and sprayed with Raid, okay? That wasp was dead, 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 dead. And I was going to use it as evidence to campaign for Pain for Pest Control. Because I was like, I don't want bugs in my house. And, it's South Texas. Bugs get in your house. It's just a fact of life here. And so I had cut off that piece of the newspaper that the dead, decapitated wasp was on. And I put it in a sandwich bag. And I just zipped it up and, just left it there on a bookshelf in our living room to show my husband when he got home and say, oh, please get pest control, please, please. Well, he gets home, right? And I go to show him the wasp. The wasp's body inside the sandwich bag is moving around. And it's flexing its legs. Now, I had killed the wasp sometime in the later morning. My husband did not get home from work till about 5:30 p.m. So that wasp had been decapitated and deceased in the sandwich bag for at least 5 hours. And here it was trying to move. And my husband's like, look, it's trying to find its head. He's that way. And I'm just like, no, this is something bizarre. And he's looking at it. He looks at me and he says, call a priest. Again, that's how he is. I take it all in stride. So I got rid of it. I didn't even dump it in the trash. I took it to a public dumpster, behind a restaurant and tossed it in there. So I don't know what that was all about, but it sure as heck was not normal. Therefore, if it is not normal, and I wouldn't even call it abnormal, I would call this paranormal, especially with the way my cat reacted. So that was just another instance. But we moved years later. My daughter was now 5 years old. We moved to Houston, Texas. My husband got a new job. He was in the banking industry at the time. And we relocated up here. And we had to rent an apartment for a year to give us time to find, the proper house. So we're in the apartment. Again, my cat Dickens, right across the threshold of my daughter's room every night. And I was just like, wow, I thought it was just the house in Corpus, but it looks like this crap followed us, or it's something that was attached to my daughter. I don't know, because like I said, I had experiences while I was pregnant that I will share in a future video. It may have been from that. And this negative energy wanted to get rid of her because it knew she was going to do something later in life that it did not like. That's what I'm guessing. Anyway, she was playing in her room one day, and it's the middle of the afternoon, and she comes running out, and she says, Mom, my little phone's being weird. I'm like, what do you mean it's being weird? She says, it's saying a word. I'm like, well, yeah, honey, when you press the buttons, it talks. She goes, no, it's saying the same word over and over again. I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, batteries going out? And I said to her, just out of curiosity, well, what's it saying? She's saying, it's saying, man. I'm like, man? So I go in her room, and her little toy phone was in the middle of the floor. The receiver was off. And it's got its 10 buttons on it, 0 through 9. And each button you press, you get a different little voice coming out, giving your child a little message. Well, the phone was going, man. So it did sound like the word man. And I quickly went through my memory, and I thought, there's nothing in that phone that sounds like this. I was thinking it could have been part of a word, a syllable. I was like, no. So I take the phone, I say, honey, it just needs new batteries. Let me go put new batteries in. I'm an intelligent person. I always err on the side of logic unless something shows me immediately this is not a logical occurrence, right? There was nothing to tell me that this was paranormal, except my cat Dickens was right there at my feet looking up at the phone. And I'm looking down at him like, don't you start. Don't you freak me out. So I go in the kitchen, take out the batteries, put new batteries in, give it back to her. She's happy. She takes it back to her room. Not 10 minutes go by, and she comes running out of her room, and she's going, it's doing it again. It's saying man. And she says, there's a man who wants to talk to me. I'm like, what the hell? I go in her room, and again, same situation, except now her toy phone is on her bed, the receiver's off, and I can hear the phone saying, man. And I'm just like, oh my God. And so I grab it, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take the batteries out. I took the batteries out. And later on, it did the same thing with no batteries. I grabbed that damn phone, and I threw it in the trash can at the end of our complex. We lived in a really big apartment complex. It had like 15 buildings in it, and each building had 3 stories. A lot of people live there, so they had a lot of dumpsters throughout the complex, and I went to the one furthest from our apartment to get rid of that phone. Well, then, a little while later, not very much longer, she made friends with a little boy who lived down the hall from us, and who was disabled, and he would go out with his dad, and they would fly toy rockets around. And he was like around 10 at the time. And Ariel was, like I said, she was really young. She was 5. And she'd go hang out with them and watch the rockets and everything, have a lot of fun. So she's out there with them, and I go to get her because it's dinner time. And I'm talking with the kid's dad. And I don't even know how the subject of the toy phone came up and the weird noise, but somehow I found myself telling him about this experience we had. And he says to me, well, don't you know about the guy who, got murdered right over here? And I'm like, no. What guy? When was this? Our apartment complex, the land it sits on, was right next to a horse stable. And evidently, the land that our apartment complex sat on was originally was part of a horse farm. And so they sold off half the land of their farm to this company who came in and put up these apartments. And according to the neighbors, story that he was told, some guy at the farm was found dead, and someone had, I can't remember now if they had knifed him or if they had shot him, but it was clearly a murder. There was no murder weapon around, so it's not like he harmed himself. You know, somebody did something to him. And I'm just like, because our specific building in which our apartment is, our apartment and that particular neighbor's apartments faced the horse stables. And actually, from my daughter's window, you could watch them training those horses next door. And it was a lot of fun. We would sit at her window or go out on our balcony and watch them, you know, with the horses. So yeah, there was that. The haunted phone. And I mentioned this in another video that's here at my channel. You can watch it here when you're done with this one. This one's winding down. So I really believe that our pets, especially cats, can be guardians. I mean, dogs, they naturally protect us. And dogs can also alert us to when there are aspects of the paranormal at work in our lives or loose in our homes. If you ever see a dog staring at a wall, or worse, barking or snarling at a wall, or just at some blank space and there's nothing there, there's something there. Dogs and cats can see much more of the light spectrum than the human eye can. That's a proven fact. And I believe they can see these entities. They can definitely sense them. That's for sure. So the next time your cat howls at you weird, or your dog barks or snarls at nothing, don't get upset with them. Go check. Determine if you can sense something there, because you just might. This has been True Tales of the Paranormal. I am Nefer Kefri, your hostess with the ghostess. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed already. I wish you all a blessed day ahead.